Honourable Tariana Turia.
I move that the Mokomoko Restoration of Character, Mana and Reputation Bill be now read a third time. Kia koutou te whānau a Mokomoko, ka nui te mahira wā te kia koutou, ko tai mai nei ki te waka nui, tēnei kaupapa o koutou. Today we honour Te Wakatohea Rangatira Mokomoko and the generations of his family. This bill gives legal effect to the agreement to introduce legislation to give statutory recognition to the Mokomoko pardon signed by Dr. Peter Sharples on behalf of the Crown and Tuiranga Mokomoko on behalf of the whānau at Waioa Marae on the 28th of September 2011. A large number of whānau gathered that day, kaumātua, Pākeke and rangatahi, and also signed in support. I mihi to the whānau today gathered in the House and acknowledge the long journey that they have travelled to see justice for their tūpuna. As the world mourns the loss of a great leader and pays tribute to the long walk to freedom that represented his life, it is indeed fitting to consider the influence of his example across many lands, including those who act as a similar force for change here in Aotearoa. I want to note the contributions of Tuiranga Mokomoko and Mātinga Biddle. Both passed away shortly before the first reading of this bill. During their lives, Tuiranga and Mātinga helped carry the burden of this kaupapa and guide their whānau forward. I think of them now and the enduring legacy that they have left behind for their mokopuna to inherit. Moi mai rā kōrua, moi mai rā. This bill will formally restore the character, mana and reputation of their tūpuna Mokomoko, a rangatira of Te Wakatohea, who was executed by the Crown in 1866 for his alleged involvement in the murder of Reverend Carl Volkner. Some in this House will vividly recall that 19 years ago a free pardon was provided to Mokomoko for his role in this event. For others, that history may be less known, and my hope is that with this legislation, as New Zealanders, we understand the grief that has haunted successive generations and learn from it. I want to emphasise the significance of this bill to the descendants of the Mokomoko whānau. It progresses the Crown's express undertaking to restore the character, mana and reputation of their tūpuna Mokomoko and of the whānau by providing statutory recognition of the free pardon. It represents the efforts of the leadership group to bring this issue to the Crown's attention and to enable the whānau to finally start their healing process. The bill is a sign of the Crown's commitment to restore its relationship with the whānau by expressing its regret that the shame and stigma carried by them was not remedied by the pardon that was provided in 1992. Tried and sentenced to death for the murder of Carl Volkner, throughout his trial Mokomoko maintained his innocence. The suffering, shame and stigma associated for his whānau for the alleged involvement of their tūpuna in those events has been carried by generations. Today we address the shame and stigma carried by those generations. Shame and stigma that should never have been theirs to bear. Mr. Speaker, it has been a burden few families have ever had to bear. A burden that saw the public execution of their tūpuna Mokomoko at Mount Eden Stockade just after 8 a.m. on the morning of Thursday the 17th of May in 1866. A burden that months earlier saw their tūpuna, the Hoa Rangatira of Mokomoko, Kimohea, repeatedly raped and bayoneted to death by government soldiers. What sort of shameful history are we all a part of? A burden that saw Crown soldiers who raided the lands of Wakatohea, killing civilians, burning homes and destroying crops. A burden that saw hundreds of thousands of acres of land that was taken by the Crown within the rohe of Wakatohea, Ngāti Awa and Tūhoe. It has been a burden that has seen generations of these descendants wrongfully blamed for this unjust, appalling raupatu and killing. Mr. Speaker, over 147 years through generations, this family have fought to clear the name of their tūpuna, the name of their whānau, and they have fought to see justice pass. After generations of struggle, a free pardon was granted for Mokomoko in 1992. This should have been a constructive step for the whānau. The Crown's intention was right the way. right, but the way the pardon was provided compounded their grievance. The Crown did not consult whānau on the wording of the free pardon. The wording, in fact, implied it was only done because of similar pardons provided to the co-accused of Mokomoko. It did not expressly restore his character, mana and reputation, nor the character, mana and reputation of his uri, and it did not record the pardon in statute. As a result, we, the Crown, perpetuated the shame and stigma endured by this whānau, and for that, on behalf of the Crown, I fully and unreservedly apologise. This bill intends to correct those omissions. The whānau has consulted closely on the wording of this bill, and I hope it will in some way go to restoring the character, mana and reputation of their tūpuna and their whānau. I want to mihi to this whānau once more for their courage and foresight in proposing to the Māori Affairs Committee that the recognition for their tūpuna be provided in both te reo Māori and in English. Enacting legislation in te reo and English is a first for our Parliament. Currently, standing orders enable members to conduct many aspects of the business of Parliament in te reo Māori if they choose. This is the logical next step, and it is a truly historic development, and I thank you. I want to acknowledge the committee for this huge step that they have taken in establishing a precedent that's based on te reo rangatira. The committee also noted the whānau request for the wider historical narrative to be told and for an apology from the Crown. The committee noted that these issues will be addressed appropriately through future historical treaty settlements. Until then, I will, on behalf of the Crown, apologise to the whānau for perpetuating the shame and stigma heaped on te whānau a Mokomoko. I do note that the preamble records the background to the treatment of Mokomoko and the men of Ngāti Awa in relation to the murder of Carl Volkner and the Waitangi Tribunal's findings on 1992 of a free pardon. In this respect, the bill is confined to correcting omissions related to the 1992 free pardon. It restores the mana of te whānau a Mokomoko. Mr Speaker, much of the history has been recorded by the Waitangi Tribunal in its Ngāti Awa Raupatu report and Te Urewera Part 1 report. This will form the basis of discussions to be held with the Crown to settle historical treaty claims. When this bill first came before the House earlier this year, a reporter asked a whānau elder to tell her what motivated him, and the karaua replied that his motivation was quite simple. Our tūpuna, our whānau, our hapu, iwi and our children and their children and their children and their children. We may not be the greatest whānau in the world, but we are loyal, we have fought for our country, we are humble people and we have big hearts. Mr Speaker, we say to that whānau who have big hearts that this is a huge understatement. Their incredible spirit of generosity enables us to stand before them today. The Crown standing alongside of them today to look at the past with our eyes wide open, and we do not look away. All those things that this whānau have suffered and lost due to the actions of the Crown can never be replaced or forgotten, and yet today they are here. Their presence honours this Parliament. Arrested, tried and convicted and finally executed by the Crown while in prison, Mokomoko composed a waiata that has become a guiding philosophy for generations of whānau. Tangohia te taura I o taku kaki ki a waiata au I taku waiata. Take the rope from my throat that I may sing my song. And today we pay tribute again to ngā uri a Mokomoko, who like their tūpuna have had the strength to speak up, who have refused to let the truth be silenced, who are the reason why we are gathered here today to pass milestone legislation, not just in the history of their family, but in the history of our nation. And today we consider legislation that seeks to restore the character, reputation, the mana of a man, a rangatira and his whānau. The dying words of Mokomoko were words that have never been far from his descendants' heart. E mate hara koe ana ahau, tēnā koutou Pākehā, hei aha. I die an innocent man, Farewell, Pākehā, so be it. Tēnā koutou te whānau, tēnā koutou. I mihi to you and to your tūpuna for having the strength, the mana and the determination to speak up so that the truth will not be silenced. Thank you for your courage, for your compassion, your enduring patience and your willingness to forgive. This nation is better because of your generosity. Nā reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. The Honourable Shane Jones.
Speaker, te reo Māori.